I have carried a 9mm on my hip for more years than I care to count. I have stacked it deep in the ammo cans, and I have run thousands of rounds of it through everything from polymer strikers to steel-framed hammers. But recently, I have been watching the landscape change at the range, and looking at the state of the industry in 2025, it is becoming obvious that we are seeing a ballistic shift. There are newer calibers, and some revitalized classics, that are starting to encroach on the territory that the 9mm used to hold uncontested. What is going on, freedom lovers? This is Ted from Line 45. Today, we are going to break down the specific cartridges that are creeping into the range bags of serious shooters, and we are going to talk about why the 9mm is not always the default answer anymore. Before we send rounds downrange, do me a huge favor. Crush that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It costs you nothing, but it helps a brother out immensely with the algorithm gods. It motivates me to keep bringing you this high-value content right to your screen. Now, lock and load, and let us get into the briefing. The context. Why 9mm ruled walk into any firing line in America, and the odds are high you will see someone stuffing a mag with 9mm Luger. For a long time, that was my loadout too. A Glock 19 in the holster, a case of ball ammo in the truck, and a system that just ran. It is not hard to understand the logic there. When you balance price, terminal performance, and availability, the 9 earned its title as the King of the Hill. It was not always the absolute best at one specific metric, but it did everything well enough to become the gold standard. Back in the 80s, NATO standardized it, and that choice trickled down to domestic law enforcement. Once the FBI moved away from the 40 Smith & Wesson and reevaluated their ballistics protocol, they landed squarely back on the 9mm. Modern bonded hollow points could deliver penetration and expansion that was neck and neck with the 40, but you got less muzzle flip and higher capacity. That decision started a domino effect. Federal agencies switched, and the civilian market followed suit. Then we hit the concealed carry boom. When pistols like the SIG P365 hit the gun counters, giving you 10 or more rounds of 9mm in a gun barely bigger than a J-frame revolver, the debate was effectively over. The recoil was manageable for rookies. The hardware was getting more efficient every year, and the ammo was cheap enough to stack deep. It became the American default, not because of a mandate, but because the math worked. But right now, shooters are taking a step back and asking a hard question. What else is out there? So, let us investigate the calibers that are actually carving out their own territory in 2025, and why they are gaining traction. Number 1. The Capacity King, 30 Super Carry. Let's talk about the 30 Super Carry. If you have ever run a magazine through a Shield Plus chambered in 30 Super Carry, you might have noticed the slide tracks differently. It feels smoother. That is not a fluke. Federal did not cook up this cartridge just to chase a fad. They engineered it to change the math for concealed carriers who obsess over footprint and capacity. The 30 Super Carry pushes a 100-grain HST projectile at roughly 1250 feet per second. Ballistically, you are looking at energy and expansion that lands right in the 9mm structural integrity. But the smaller diameter gives you an advantage. You get 13+1 capacity in a frame that used to max out at 10+1. That is not theoretical whiteboard math. That is real steel, real magazines, and real reps on the firing line. The recoil impulse is just a hair lighter, which is enough to shave split times off your double taps without fighting the muzzle rise. That tight grouping you are always chasing with your micro compact 9? It is significantly easier to hold that group together with this round. Now, I will be real with you. It is not a budget plinking round. Defensive loads are hovering around $35 a box, but you are paying for nickel-plated brass, sealed primers, and clean-burning propellants. I have dissected enough of these rounds after range sessions to see the consistency in the crimping and the expansion tests. Those HST pedals bloom exactly the way you need them to, even out of a short 3.1-inch barrel. This round is not trying to wipe the 9mm off the map. It is carving a specific lane for people who want deeper magazines without stepping up to a physically larger firearm. And if you think 3 rounds is a small detail, go ask anyone who carries appendix if they would refuse a 30% capacity increase. Number 2, the Velocity Specialist, 5.7 by 28mm. Coming up next, we are shifting to something with some serious velocity. we need to discuss the flat-shooting 5.7 by 28mm and how it changes the engagement rules. The FN57 was the first handgun I ever gripped that felt like it was hiding a rifle action inside the polymer. That is the wild card factor of the 5.7 by 28mm. It does not try to outmuscle the 9mm. It outthinks it. You get negligible recoil, extended effective range, and massive capacity. You do not feel a heavy blast. You feel precision. The cartridge itself utilizes a 40-grain projectile, 22.4 diameter, screaming at around 2,300 feet per second out of a 5-inch barrel. Calling it flat shooting is an understatement. I zeroed my optic at 25 yards and I was still ringing steel dead on at 75. The bullet drop just does not exist the way it does with a 9mm parabola. And the thing that really gets you is how that bottleneck case feeds. It is clean, with zero nosedives. It runs smoother through double-stack magazines like the PSA Rocks 23 rounder than most 9mm setups I have handled. The FN57 features a polymer over steel slide assembly and an internal hammer-fired system. The controls are fully ambidextrous. The slide rides a little higher than your typical striker-fired gun, but the muzzle stays absolutely pinned during follow-up shots. Ruger's take on this caliber uses an anodized aluminum slide and a crisp hammer-driven fire control system that feels very secure. Their magazines are polymer reinforced with steel feed lips, and they hold 20 rounds flush. The ammo cost is higher, there is no doubt about that. You are looking at $38 to $50 for defensive loads like the Gold Dot or the Elite Defender. But when you calculate the soft armor penetration capability, the lack of recoil, and the laser-flat trajectory, the equation makes sense. This is not a plinker's round. It is built for mission-oriented shooting in a handgun chassis. Number 3. The Powerhouse 10mm Auto. Now, if you are thinking that speed is nice, but you want something that hits like a freight train, we are not done yet. Enter the 10mm Auto. When you grip a Springfield XDM Elite chambered in 10mm, the heft alone tells you this is not for light duty. You press that trigger, feel the slide cycle with authority, and you realize this is not about internet debates. It is about torque. It is about carrying a cartridge built to punch through barriers that a 9mm would not even scratch. The 10mm is not replacing the 9 out of nostalgia. It is doing it because shooters are demanding more. More kinetic energy, more effective range, and more fight-stopping capability. A 200-grain load, like the Underwood XTP, leaves the muzzle at 1,250 feet per second, pushing nearly 700 foot-pounds of energy. That is real power. That is hitting harder than most .357 Magnum loads, but you get it with semi-auto capacity and faster reload speeds. The XDM Elite OSP comes optic-ready with a match-grade 5.25-inch hammer-forged barrel. You get a fiber optic front sight and a fully adjustable rear. It runs a short reset MET trigger that breaks very cleanly. The slide is forged steel with a melanite finish for corrosion resistance. The grip texture is aggressive enough to stick, but it will not cheese-grater your hands. The magazines hold 16 rounds of 10mm. You get full-size control over a big-bore cartridge that used to be the exclusive domain of wheel guns. The ammo is not cheap. You are paying $30 to $45 for a 20-round box of the serious defensive stuff. But this is not for punching paper at 7 yards. This is the round guys carry in bear country. This is what rides in the truck when you leave the paved roads behind. More shooters are making that jump because 10mm gives you a margin of error that lesser calibers simply do not possess. Number 4. The Barrier Blind Specialist 357 SIG. And if that balance of power and speed still does not scratch your itch, let us dive into a bottleneck round that slices through barriers like it has a personal vendetta. The 357 SIG. The first 357 SIG I ever chambered was not at a media event. It was for a buddy who asked me what I would carry if I needed a flat-shooting, hard-hitting pistol that could still ride on my belt without printing. I handed him a SIG P229 in 357 SIG. Not because it was exotic, but because it solved a tactical problem. This cartridge is not about flash. It is a necked-down 40 S&W case firing a 9mm projectile with a specific mission: defeat barriers cleanly. A 125-grain Speer Gold Dot clocks around 1,400 feet per second. We are not talking 9mm plus P here. We are talking about real velocity, that stays flat past 50 yards and still expands reliably after punching through auto glass or car doors. The SIG P229 eats this round like it was born for it because it features a stainless slide milled from bar stock and an alloy frame that can take the punishment. The locking lugs are beefier than the 9mm variants, and the recoil system is tuned to handle that snap without battering the frame. It feels like a solid piece of steel in your hand for a reason. You do not carry this round to be trendy. You carry it when you prioritize velocity, precision, and a cartridge that was designed from the drawing board to outperform 9mm on hard targets. Number 5. The Flamethrower, 22 TCM. And lastly, we have the 22 TCM. Walk into an indoor range with a Rock Island Armory, 22 TCM 1911, and crack off a few rounds. Every head in the room will turn. Not just because it is loud, and it is loud, but because the report sounds like nothing else on the line. That sharp, fiery, concussive blast is a wake-up call to the 9mm loyalists. The 22 TCM is not trying to be an alternative. It is pushing to be a superior option for shooters who care about speed and control in a platform they already know. This round is a bottleneck cartridge based on a shortened .223 Remington case, firing a 40-grain projectile at roughly 2,000 feet per second out of a 5-inch barrel. That velocity does not just flatten the trajectory, it punches through body panels and hard barriers with ease, yet it keeps the recoil impulse softer than a standard 9mm. That is the strange magic of this system. You get Magnum-level speed, but with surprisingly little muzzle flip. Rock Island's TCM series is the launchpad for this caliber. The standard FS model is a full-size 1911 with a Parkerized steel frame. You get a fiber optic front sight, a skeletonized trigger and hammer, and a 5-inch ramped barrel specifically built to handle the TCM's pressure. It uses a delayed blowback system tuned to the round. And best of all, it ships with a 9mm barrel and recoil spring for easy caliber swapping. The magazines hold 10 to 17 rounds, depending on the configuration. Ammo runs about $25 to $35 for a box of 50, and Armscore is the primary producer. That limits your supply chain a bit, but in return, you are getting something few pistol rounds can deliver. Rifle-like velocity and a sidearm that feels like a tuned race gun. The right tool for the mission. Go into any decent gun shop these days, and the conversation around 9mm does not hit the same way it used to. It is still the workhorse, sure, but more folks, guys who carry daily and guys who train hard, are asking for something more specific, and I get it. I have been on the range with 357 SIGs blowing through glass like it is wet paper. I have watched 10mm flattened steel targets that 9mm just nudges. And I have seen how flat and fast a 5.7 by 28mm runs out of a PSA Rock or an FN 5.7. These are not just alternatives. They are solutions to problems that the 9mm cannot always solve. The shift is happening because we are not stuck with just one tool in the toolbox anymore. You have loads now like Federal HST in 10mm or Spear Gold Dot in 357 SIG that hit harder and penetrate deeper. And the 22 TCM? That thing is basically a handheld varmint round that fits in a 1911 frame. Faster, flatter, and with less recoil than you would ever expect. The old argument was always cost and availability, but now the guns are out there, the ammo supply is catching up, and more shooters are getting smarter about exactly what round fits their mission profile. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below. Are you sticking with the 9, or are you moving to something more specialized? I want to hear from you. Until next time, stay safe and keep training.